It had happened when I was 10 or 11 years old. I had decided to learn to swim. There was a pool at the YMCA in Yakima that offered exactly the opportunity. The Yakima River was treacherous. Mother continuously warmed against it and kept fresh in my mind the details of each drowning in the river. But the YMCA pool was safe. It was only 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end. And while it was 9 feet deep at the other, the drop was gradual. I got a pair of water wings and went to the pool. I hated to walk naked into it and show my skinny legs. But I subdued my pride and did it. From the beginning, however, I had an aversion to water when I was in it. This started when I was 3 or 4 years old and father took me to the beach in California. He and I stood together in the surf. I hung on him, yet the waves knocked me down and swept over me. I was buried in water. My breath was gone. I was frightened. Father laughed, but there was terror in my heart at the overpowering force of waves. My introduction to YMCA swimming pool revived unpleasant memories and shed the childish fears. But in a little while, I gathered confidence. I paddled with my new water wings, watching the other boys and trying to learn by aping them. I did this 2 or 3 times on a different days and was just beginning to feel at ease in water when the misadventure happened. I went to the pool where no one else was there. The place was quiet. The water was still. Then the tide bottom was as white and clean as bathtub. I was timid about going in alone, so I sat on the side of the pool to wait for others. I had not been there long when in came a big bruiser of a boy, probably 18 years old. He had a thick hair on his chest and he was a beautiful physical specimen, with legs and arms that showed rippling muscles. He yelled, "Hi, Skinny. How do you like to be ducked?" With that, he picked me up and tossed me into the deep end. I landed in a sitting position, swallowed water, and went at the once to the bottom. I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. On the way down, I planned. When my feet hit the bottom, I would make a big jump, come to surface, lie flat on it, and paddle to the edge of the pool. It seemed a long way down. It was 9 feet or more, like 90, and before I touched bottom, my lungs were ready to burst. But when my feet hit the bottom, I summoned all my strength and made what I thought was a great spring upwards. I imagined I would bob to the surface like a cock. Instead, I came up slowly. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but water. Water that had a dirty yellow tinge to it. I drew panically. I reached up as if to grab a rope and my hands clutched only at water. I was suffocating. I tried to yell but no sound came out. Then my eyes and nose came out of water, but not my mouth. I floated at the surface of water, swallowed and choked. I tried to bring my legs up, but they hung as dead weights, paralyzed and rigged. A great force was pulling me under. I screamed, but only the water heard me. I had started on the long journey back to the bottom of the pool. I struck at the water as I went down, expanding my strength as one in a nightmare fights an irresistible force. I had lost all my breath. My lungs ached, my head throbbed. I was getting dizzy, but that me remembered strategy. I would spring from the bottom of the pool and come like a cork to the surface. I would lie flat on the water, strike out with my arms and thrash with my legs. Then I would get to the edge of the pool and be safe. I went down, endlessly. I opened my eyes, nothing but water with a yellow glow. Dark water that one could not see through. And then sheer stark terror seized me, terror that knows no understanding, terror that knows no control, terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. It was shaking underwater. I was paralyzed underwater, stiff, rigid with fear. Even screams in my throat were frozen. Only my heart and the pounding in my head said that I was still alive. And then in the midst of terror came a touch of reason. I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. At the last I felt the tiles under me. My toes reached out as if to grab them. I jumped with everything I had. But the jump made no difference. The water was still around me. I looked for ropes, ladders, water wings. Nothing but water. A mass of yellow water held me. Stark terror took an even deeper hold on me, like great charge of electricity. I shook and trembled with fright. My arms wouldn't move. My legs wouldn't move. I tried to call for help, to call for mother. Nothing happened. And then, strangely, there was a light. I was coming out of awful yellow water. At least my eyes were. My nose was almost out, too. Then I started down a third time. I sucked for air and got water. The yellowish light was going out. Then all effort ceased. I relaxed. Even my legs felt limp, and a blackness swept over my brain. It wiped out fear. It wiped out terror. There was no more panic. It was quiet and peaceful. Nothing to be afraid of. This is nice to be drowsy, to go to sleep. No need to jump. Too tired to jump. It's nice to be carried gently, to float along in space. Tender arms around me, tender arms like mother's. Now I must go to sleep. I closed to oblivion, and the curtain of life fell. The next I remember was lying on my stomach beside the pool, vomiting. The chap that threw me in was saying, "But I was only fooling." Someone said, "The kid nearly died. Be all right now. Let's carry him to the locker room." Several hours later, I walked home. I was weak and trembling. I shook and cried when I lay on my bed. I couldn't eat that night. For days, a haunting fear was in my heart. The slightest exertion upset me, making me wobbly in the knees and sick to my stomach. I never went back to the pool. I feared water. I avoided it whenever I could. A few years later, when I came to know the waters of the Cascades, I wanted to get into them. And whenever I did, whether I was wading the Titan or bumping the river or bathing in a warm lake of gold rocks, the terror that had seized me in the pool would come back. It would take possession of me completely. My legs would become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart. This handicap stayed with me as the year rolled by. In the canoes on the many lakes fishing for lead-rocked salmon. Bad fishing in New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Deschutes of the Matterhorns in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia at the Bumping Creek in the Cascades. Whenever I bent, the haunting fear of water followed me. It ruined my fishing trips, deprived me of joy of going boating and swimming. I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but it held me firmly in its grip. Finally, one October, I decided to get an instructor to learn to swim. I went to the pool and practiced 5 days a week, an hour each day. The instructor put a belt with me. A rope attached to the belt went to a tree that ran on an overhead cable. He held on to the end of the rope, and we went back and forth across the pool. One day, trip across the pool, a bit of panic seized me. Each time, the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope, and I went under. Some of the old terror was down and my legs froze. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack. Then he told me to put my face under water and exhale, and to raise my nose and inhale. I repeated the exercise hundreds of times. Bit by bit, I shed part of the panic that seized me and my head went underwater. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. For weeks, I did just that. At first, my legs refused to work, but they gradually relaxed, and finally I could command them. And thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer, and when he had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. And after he said, "Now you can swim." Dive off and swim the length of the pool. Crawled, stroke. I did. The instructor was finished, but I was not finished. I still wondered if I would be terror-stricken when I was alone in the pool. I tried it. I swam the length up and down. Tiny vestiges of old terror would return. But now I could frown and say to the terror, "Trying to scare me, huh? Well, here to you, look," and off I would go for another length of the pool. This went on until July, when I went, still not satisfied. I was not sure that all terror had left, so when the lake went worth in the New Hampshire, dived off a dock at Triggs S-Line, and swam 2 miles across the lake at Stamback Island. I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. Only once did the terror return. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. The old sensation returned in miniature. I laughed and said, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" I fled and I swam on. Yet I had residual doubts. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up the Teatian to Conard Meadows, up the Conard Creek Trail to Media Glacier, and camped in the high medieval side of Foam Lake. The next morning, I stripped, dived into the lake, and swam across to the other shore and back, just as Doc Corporon used to do. I shouted with joy, and a Gilbert Beak turned echo. I had conquered my fear of water. The experience had a deep meaning for me, as only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. In death there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said, "All we have to fear is fear itself." Because I had experienced both the sensation of time and terror that fate of it can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. At last, I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear.